Hi, welcome back guys. This is your friend, the What If guy, back with another fanfiction. This is the first part of What If Issei Hyoudou the Book of Fate. Now before starting, please give this video a like and subscribe to the channel if you want more videos like this. Now let's get into the fanfic. In a small town in Japan called Kuro, a young teen no older than 17 sat on the roof of Kuro Academy, his expression filled with despair. This boy was Issei Hyoudou, a member of the infamous perverted trio, who had become the target of disdain from nearly every female student in the school. The reason for his current state was simple. He had been expelled from the occult research club due to his inappropriate behavior. The members, fed up with his antics, had told him to only return when he was needed. Following this, rumors began to circulate, suggesting he had taken advantage of the girls in the club, leading to his ostracism from his peers. Matters worsened when his parents learned of the situation. They disowned him, throwing him out of their home along with his belongings. Now, Issei sat lost in thought, contemplating how his past actions had led him to this moment. He reflected on his obsession with being the harem king, a dream that, while appealing, had brought him nothing but trouble. As he pondered his situation, a deep voice echoed in his mind, "Drag, the Red Dragon Emperor. Don't be so down, partner. At least you've realized your mistakes instead of ignoring them and continuing to act foolishly. You should be grateful to them for helping you see the truth," Drag rumbled, his concern for Issei evident. The dragon was impressed by Issei's determination to change and disappointed in those who had turned their backs on him after he had freed Rias. Issei sighed, feeling the weight of betrayal. "I guess you're right, Drag, but it still hurts. I trusted them and worked hard to impress them, despite my flaws, and they just discarded me." "Then why don't you leave?" Drake suggested, catching Issei off guard. "What did you say?" Issei exclaimed, unsure if he had heard correctly. "If this place brings you pain, then leave. You can explore new places, learn new things, and make new friends. There's nothing holding you back," Drake encouraged, sensing Issei's hesitation. "But I'm still Rias's pawn. If I leave, I'll be branded a stray," Issei thought, worried about the consequences of abandoning his current life. "That's why I will help train you. I can't have a weak host. As for the pawn pieces, I can remove them, but it would require turning you into a full dragon, and there's a chance you could die," Drake explained, leaving Issei to contemplate the gravity of the decision. Meanwhile, far away from Earth, in the center of the universe, a small planet floated silently. On its surface stood an ancient temple, housing a pedestal with a book that floated above it. Mysterious melodies resonated throughout the temple, being absorbed by the book. This was the Book of Fate, and it was searching for a worthy wielder. As it continued its quest, the book suddenly detected a signal from a world it had previously explored. Intrigued, it sought out the source and was surprised to find it was Issei Hyoudou. When the book had first assessed the planet, it had deemed Issei unworthy for obvious reasons. However, now it sensed a change in him. He was beginning to understand the consequences of his past actions. It also found the fact that he didn't hate the orc and his parents admirable. Satisfied with its observation, the ancient book decided it would give the boy a chance to prove himself. With that, the book vanished in a flash of blinding light. Back with Issei, he was stumped. While he didn't want to leave his friends, he also believed that the dragon in his arm had a point. On one hand, they had abandoned him, and while he didn't hate them, he didn't trust them like he did before. It would be best if he spent some time alone. On the other hand, if he were to leave, he would be branded a stray and killed on sight, not to mention being targeted by the other factions because of his sacred gear. His train of thought was interrupted by a flash of light, and Issei had to cover his eyes from the intensity. When he could see again, he was surprised to find a book floating in front of him. While he wasn't good at sensing other signatures, he could feel the seemingly infinite amount of power radiating from the object. Slowly, the book moved towards him until it was just a few inches away from his upper chest. Then the book opened to reveal some blank pages, and words began to appear on the pages. "Greetings, young one. You have been chosen as a potential candidate to wield the Book of Origin. This item has existed since the dawn of time and has the power to make whatever the wielder desires a reality. In order to become the wielder, you must answer some questions, And should your answers be satisfactory, you would be the first ever wielder of the Book of Fate. Do you accept? Issei was left speechless, and Drake was no better. To think that there was something so powerful and that his host of all people would be its first wielder. Drake could only think, if Issei actually manages to pull it off, then Albion is in trouble. Meanwhile, Issei was contemplating whether to accept or not, but remembering he had nothing to lose, he steeled himself and looked at the book with determined eyes. I accept, Issei declared. Very well. First question, what is it you dream to accomplish in the future? At first, Issei wanted to shout about being the harem king, but he quickly pushed that thought away. He was trying to lessen his perverted nature before he did something foolish. After a minute of contemplation, he found an answer that satisfied him. My dream is to create a place for people to live in peace, with no conflict, and where everyone is free to express their opinions, he stated passionately. This was not a lie, as he had always defended those he cared about, and even when he had been a pervert, he would never do anything without consent. Next question, if you were stuck in a room with your worst enemy, what would you do? That was a tough question. His mind went to Rainier and what she had done to Asia. However, something didn't feel right. Despite her malicious intent, after their date and at the church, her eyes had held a small twinge of guilt that he hadn't noticed due to his anger. He didn't see it then, but he could still recall it in the perfect memory he had. Steeling himself, he answered truthfully. I would first see what happened from their perspective and try to make amends if possible, he replied. Final question, should you be entrusted with the Book of Fate, what would you do with its power? For that last question, Issei didn't even need to think. He gave his answer confidently. I will use that power to protect those precious to me and help those who need my help. He couldn't help it. Back when he was a kid, he had always dreamed of being a hero. Helping those in need was something he had always admired. Unfortunately, things had changed after a certain incident, and Issei had given in to his lust and become the pervert he was today. Despite that, his desire to protect others never changed, and he had proved that when he crashed Reiser's wedding and saved Rias. Back to the present, the book remained still, and no words appeared on the pages for a few seconds, as if it were contemplating something. Finally, it responded. Issei, you have many faults, and you are far from being a perfect wielder. Issei slumped when he read those words. Oh well, it was worth a shot. However, your desire to protect those you care about and to show compassion to even your worst enemy is something that cannot be ignored. Congratulations, young man, on passing the test and becoming the first wielder of the Book of Fate. Issei's breath hitched when he read those words. He did it. Letting out a whoop of joy, he then looked at the book and began to say, "Thank you," over and over again. Suddenly, he felt a tingling sensation in his head and realized it was the book connecting with his mind. He wanted to test it out but decided he had some things to do first. What do you have to do, partner? Drake asked, curious about what could be more important than testing his new power. In return, Issei gave his partner a sad smile. I have some people I need to apologize to, he replied as he slowly walked towards his first destination, the Kendo Club. Issei was nervous. It was understandable as he stood at the door of the Kendo Club, where he was not well liked. He was tempted to leave but quickly shook that thought away. He had to do this. He looked down at the Book of Fate resting in his right hand and then willed it to disappear. Taking a deep breath, he knocked on the door and waited. A few seconds later, the door opened, revealing none other than Murayama and Keitase. As soon as they saw who was at the door, their curious looks morphed into expressions of disgust. What do you want, Hyoudou? Keitase said, spitting out his old family name with venom. However, they were genuinely surprised when Issei bowed at them in an apologetic manner. I want to apologize for all the times I peeked at you. I know you won't forgive me, and I understand if you don't want to see me again, said the brown-haired boy to the now gaping duo. This was something they never thought they would witness. However, Keitase was the first to shake off her stupor and glared at the boy once more. You're right about that. In fact, it would be better for everyone if you were to just disappear, shouted Keitase, not realizing the weight of her words. Even Murayama was taken aback by her outburst. Once the words reached the Pinkette's ears, she realized what she had said and clearly wanted to respond, but Issei interrupted her. I see. I'm sorry for disturbing you, and I'll leave you alone. By the way, Kates, I suggest you don't call me Hyoudou, Issei told her, prompting her to regain her composure and glare at him again. And why should I do that? She asked, unaware that she would come to regret her question. She and Murayama were surprised when he smiled, not a perverted smile, but one that conveyed a deep weariness and sadness. Because the Hyoudous disowned me, was his simple reply as he walked away, leaving behind two girls with expressions full of guilt and regret, although the Pinkette felt the brunt of it. Time skip Phoenix Estate. Issei appeared at the gate of the Phoenix mansion in a flash of light, thanks to the Book of Fate. He looked at the Phoenix Estate and couldn't help but sweat at the extravagant design. Wow, they sure went overboard with the whole fire theme, he thought before shaking off the distraction and approaching the door, where he saw some guards pointing their spears at him. State your business here, demanded one of the guards. I would like to speak with Riser Phoenix, if you don't mind. Tell him Rias Gremory's pawn wishes to see him, he replied. The two guards exchanged glances before nodding and turning back to him. Very well, we will let Riser-sama know you want to see him. Wait here until we return, said the second guard as they both walked inside. Issei waited for 5 minutes before they returned and invited him in. He was amazed by the architecture and design of the interior as he followed the guards. They eventually reached a large room that Issei guessed was meant for guests. He was greeted by the sight of Riser and his peerage, noticing that Riser no longer wore the same arrogant expression he had before. Hyoudou, stated Riser in an even voice. Issei met Riser's gaze, and it seemed like they were about to clash once again when Riser surprised everyone by bowing his head apologetically. I apologize for my actions. I was too arrogant and believed my Phoenix powers were enough. Thanks to you defeating me, I learned a valuable lesson, and I thank you for that, Riser said to a now shell-shocked Issei, who was surprised that Riser Phoenix of all people was apologizing to him. Quickly regaining his composure, Issei bowed in return. There is no need to apologize. I was only doing what was right. Also, I wanted to apologize for using those holy items on you. It was the only way, Issei said, surprising Riser, who then smiled and offered his hand. Well, nevertheless, I hope we can start over, Hyoudou, Riser said. Issei smiled and shook his hand. He then apologized to Riser's peerage, especially Isle, Nell, and Mira, for using his dress break on them. It took a while, but now he was on good terms with them. By the way, why is it that only you are here? Riser asked, curious about why Issei had shown up alone. Issei's expression darkened slightly as he explained how he had been kicked out of the Orc, shunned by his peers, and disowned by his family. By the end of his story, Riser and his peerage felt anger and disappointment toward Rias, and Issei realized how fortunate he was for not marrying her. What are you going to do about it? Riser asked, wanting to help his new friend. He and the others were shocked when Issei showed them the Book of Fate and explained what had happened. Issei then shared his plan, and everyone was impressed. He bid them farewell, knowing they wouldn't see each other for a while, and disappeared in a flash of light as he had before. Riser turned to his peerage and was surprised to see all of them, except Eubelina, blushing slightly. Realizing what was happening, Riser let out a feral grin, followed by his queen. My Eubelina, it seems that my peerage has fallen for the boy, he told his queen playfully while his peerage turned bright red and began sputtering denials. This was going to be entertaining for the two of them, and for once in his life, Riser was glad to have been beaten by a low class. Back with Issei reappeared in front of a fountain in the middle of a park, recalling that this was the place where he first became a devil. He then pulled out the book that would change his life and began his plan. Using the book, he created a clone of himself that stood still like a statue. Next, he transferred his pawn pieces into the clone, turning it human again. He then wrote a letter and had the clone collapse to the ground, satisfied with his death. Issei prepared himself for a long absence from this world. Are you ready, Drake? He asked. I'm ready, partner, replied the dragon in his arm. With that, they disappeared, not to return for a long time. 3 days later, with the Occult Research Club. It was a normal day in the occult research club. Rias was at her desk doing paperwork, with Akino standing by her side. Kiba was sitting down, polishing his swords, Kaneko was eating her sweets, and Asia was sitting there with nothing to do. While everything seemed normal, they all had one person in their minds, and that was Issei Hyoudou. After he saved Rias from her engagement, she and the others were grateful for his help, and even Kaneko held a little bit of respect for him. However, that was quickly forgotten as Issei returned to his usual personality. At first, they tried to bear with it, but eventually, they couldn't hold back their frustrations. Issei was confused as to why he was suddenly called into the orc, as he usually wasn't needed at this time. He felt a mix of curiosity and apprehension as he approached the entrance. The atmosphere inside was tense, and he could sense that something significant was about to unfold. He took a deep breath and stepped inside, ready to face whatever awaited him. Surprised that everyone was there, Issei felt shivers run down his spine at the way they were looking at him. After a few tense minutes, Rias finally spoke. She expressed that she believed she spoke for everyone when she said they were all grateful for him saving her from her engagement with Riser. Everyone gave a small nod of agreement. Issei felt a swell of pride at the praise from Rias and the others, even Kaneko, but that feeling quickly faded as he heard what came next. Rias continued, stating that while they had held back their feelings because of Riser, now that they were no longer engaged, she didn't need him around anymore. The red-haired devil was unaware of the sound of shattering glass echoing in Issei's mind. Issei felt a pang of anxiety at hearing her words. He looked at the others for support. "Guys, do you think so too?" he asked, his voice tinged with hope. Everyone nodded in response. Kiba spoke up, "Don't get us wrong, Issei. We appreciate what you did, but everyone has a limit, and we've reached ours. Don't worry, it's just until we calm down." He offered his usual smile, though it was clear he was trying to be kind. Kaneko, however, did not share the same sentiment. "I always disliked you, and now that you've helped us, I hope I won't have to see you more than necessary," she stated in her usual monotone, though her tone was noticeably colder. For some reason, Issei felt as if he had been stabbed in the chest upon hearing her words and the way she delivered them. "I may not be pure myself, but I think you went too far," the queen said, her tone lacking its usual playfulness. Issei turned to Asia, hoping she would support him. "Asia?" he said, his breath shaky. Asia replied, "I'm sorry, Issei, but I can't take it anymore. I tolerated your dress break, and despite that, you still haven't had enough." The ex-nun cried out, shattering the last remnants of their understanding. A tone so emotionless that it even made Kaneko flinch filled the air as he slowly stood up, his hair shadowing his eyes, and walked out of the room. Rias and the others suddenly felt a sense of foreboding but chose to ignore it. It was Issei, he would bounce back to his normal self in no time, right? Imagine their surprise when they discovered that he hadn't shown any interest since the incident. They had also heard rumors about why he was kicked out, but they dismissed them, thinking they were probably nothing to worry about. Their thoughts were interrupted by a knock on the door. The person revealed to be none other than Sona Citri, the student council president, accompanied by her queen, Tsubaki Shinra, the vice president. Straightening herself, Rias greeted Sona with a warm smile. "Hello, Sona. What brings you here today?" Rias asked as Akron served tea to the Citri, who took a sip before thanking the queen. "I've come to talk to you about your pawn," Sona said, causing most of the group to roll their eyes, wondering what he had done this time. Sona narrowed her eyes at their reaction. She knew what had happened and certainly did not approve of their actions. "What did he do this time?" Rias asked, feeling a sense of disappointment in Issei. She had hoped he would learn, but it seemed old habits die hard. "That's the thing, he hasn't done anything, and he also hasn't attended school in the last 3 days," Sona replied, making everyone freeze. Rias composed herself before speaking again. "Have you tried contacting his parents?" she asked, shaking off the thought of him becoming a stray. "Of course I have, and imagine my surprise when I found out that they had disowned him and kicked him out of his own house," Sona said, her expression cold as she directed it toward them. The feeling of dread returned in full force, and the group began to panic. Suddenly, Rias realized something. Wait, he still has my mark. I can track him before anything bad happens, she said, sighing in relief. They then used a magic circle to teleport to Issei's location and were surprised to find themselves in the same area where he had supposedly first been reborn as a devil. They slowly turned around, and the color drained from their faces as they saw Issei Hyoudou lying on the ground, a knife in his chest and surrounded by a pool of blood. Issei! They all yelled as they rushed toward him. Asia attempted to heal him, but nothing worked, which could only mean one thing. No, 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 no. This can't be happening. Rias cried out as she collapsed to her knees, tears streaming down her face. The others were in the same state, all crying for him. They may have treated him harshly, but they never wanted this to happen. Kiba then noticed a small note, not soaked in blood, and opened it to read. To Kuo Academy, hey guys, someone told me that it would be better for everyone if I were to just die, and after giving it some thought, I realized that they were right. I know you feel sorry, but it's for the best. I hope everyone has a better time without me, and I guess this is goodbye. Sincerely, Issei. The blonde finished as he broke down on the ground, repeating, I'm sorry, over and over again. The biggest reaction came from Kaneko, who wore a look of horror ever since she learned about his disowning. After hearing his note, she cried her eyes out, mumbling apologies like Kiba, while the others wept harder. The next day, the entire school was informed of Issei's supposed death, and his note was read to everyone. It shocked everyone, filling them with guilt, but none felt it more than Kate, who cried herself to sleep many nights afterward, as she had been the one to tell him he was better off dead. Even his parents mourned his loss, realizing their mistakes far too late. Needless to say, they would be in for a surprise when they found out that he was not as dead as they thought. The sun rose over a small village, and the villagers began to emerge from their homes for work. In one house, a young boy, no older than 15, slept peacefully until sunlight streamed through the window. Groaning in discomfort, he tossed in his bed, trying to return to sleep. Eventually, he gave up, dressed in a simple black shirt and a pair of shorts, and made his way downstairs. In the kitchen, he found a man in his mid-30s sipping coffee while reading a newspaper. The boy smiled and greeted him. Good morning, Dad, Issei said as he reached for some eggs on the pan nearby. The man smiled back. Good morning, Issei. Is your sister still asleep? He asked kindly. Yes, the boy was none other than Issei Hyoudou. After faking his death, he had decided to travel to a random world for a time, finding himself in a realm reminiscent of fantasy RPG games, eager to explore and learn new things. Not long after, he encountered a man named Eiji Kaiser, who discovered Issei's past and current abilities. Feeling sympathy for the boy, Eiji adopted him, and Issei could honestly say he made the right choice in staying with him. He was pulled from his thoughts as he approached his sister's room and knocked on the door. Sis, wake up. Breakfast is ready, he called. Moments later, a slightly monotone voice responded. Give me a second. Issei waited a few minutes before the door opened, revealing a small girl about 13 years old. She had black hair, pointy ears, and slightly dull gray eyes, but life sparked in them when she saw Issei. He smiled at her and began to pet her hair. Good morning, Ophis. Are you hungry? Issei asked the infinite dragon god as if he were speaking to any normal person. He knew who she was, but it didn't matter to him. He had met her shortly after being adopted. She had said she could track him and followed him through the dimensional gap. When he asked why she followed him, she explained that she was curious and wanted to recruit him to expel Great Red from the dimensional gap. He agreed on the condition that she stay with them for a week, which she accepted. By the end of that week, Ophis had grown fond of being with Issei and Eiji, losing interest in returning to the dimensional gap. So when Issei proposed creating a new dimension for her to live in peace, she surprised everyone by refusing. In the end, Eiji adopted Ophis too, and the dragon god was happy in her new home. I am hungry, she said with a nod and a hint of a smile. The two walked down to the kitchen, with Issei unaware of the looks Ophis gave him or the small pink hue on her cheeks whenever she looked at him. Once in the kitchen, they quickly finished their meals. As they prepared to leave, Eiji took a deep breath and spoke to them. Issei, Ophis, I think you two should travel to the next world. Don't worry, I'll be fine, but I know this world isn't as powerful as some others out there, and you won't get any stronger staying here. He looked at them with a challenging expression. Seeing no way out of this, Issei decided not to argue with his father. He pulled out the Book of Fate and looked at Eiji. Well, I guess this is goodbye then, Dad. Thanks for everything, Issei said. Eiji smiled and patted him on the shoulder. Don't worry about it, son. Just so you know, I'm expecting you to bring home a couple of girls, Eiji said with mock seriousness before bursting into laughter at Issei's reddening face. Don't say things like that to me. Besides, I don't think I'm ready to open up to another girl, Issei whispered the last part, though everyone heard him. Ophis let out a small pout that looked adorable. Noticing her expression, Issei raised his hand and rubbed her head, causing the dragon god to melt under his touch. Except Ophis, of course. Issei corrected himself as he continued to rub her head while Ophis looked blissful. A few hours later, the two were ready. Issei wore his basic outfit, while Ophis donned her new attire, a gift from Issei. Eiji spoke in a serious tone, expressing his insistence. You two better visit, or I will personally drag you from whatever you are doing if I have to. Issei and Ophis exchanged confused glances. Issei questioned, and how are you going to drag us from a different world? Eiji simply shrugged and replied, because I possess the power of plot convenience. Issei resisted the urge to facepalm and decided it was time for them to leave. After one last goodbye, the two siblings vanished in a flash of light, heading to the next world. It was a beautiful morning, and many people were emerging from their homes to attend to their various tasks in the village. This village was quite large compared to a typical one, and it was distinguished by the 4 stone faces carved into a mountain behind it. This was none other than the Hidden Leaf Village, the greatest of the 5 ninja villages in the elemental nations. Issei and Ophis were approaching the village gate, which was guarded by 2 chunin who appeared to be bored. Their expressions changed as soon as they noticed Issei. The first chunin spoke, asking them to halt and state their names and purpose for visiting Konoha. Issei had cleverly transformed himself into a 12-year-old, making his story more believable. He explained that he and his sister were looking for a place to settle down, having heard about the village from a relative, and that he hoped to become a shinobi. This was a half-truth, as the book he possessed had suggested this world and village as his next destination. The chunin exchanged glances, silently communicating before nodding in agreement. The second chunin informed them to wait while they contacted the Hokage. They vanished in a flash, and Issei and Ophis waited for about 5 minutes before the chunin returned. They announced that the Hokage wished to see them and escorted the two to the Hokage Tower. Issei was already fond of the village, as many people waved at him as they passed by. Upon reaching the tower, the secretary informed them that the Hokage was expecting them. Entering the room, Issei was greeted by an elderly man in robes who smiled warmly at them. He introduced himself as Hiruzen Sarutobi, the 3rd Hokage, and expressed his pleasure in meeting them. Issei replied that the pleasure was theirs, glancing at Ophis, who nodded in agreement. The Hokage then inquired about their reasons for visiting the village. Issei considered revealing the truth but decided to use his empathetic ability instead. He sensed nothing but kindness and good intentions from the Hokage, along with a hint of regret over past mistakes. Respecting the man's privacy, Issei felt assured that he could trust him. He requested that their conversation remain private, explaining that it was important. The Hokage, initially confused, complied, dismissing the ANBU agents hiding in the shadows. Seals appeared, forming a barrier around them. Issei, wanting to be cautious, cast his own magic barrier as well. Once they were alone, the Hokage asked what Issei wanted to discuss. Taking a deep breath, Issei bluntly stated that he was not from this world. The old man's eyes widened in surprise, but he quickly regained his composure and urged Issei to explain. Issei shared his life story, how he had been killed, reincarnated, participated in the raiding game, and faced betrayal before arriving in this world. The Hokage's expression shifted through various emotions: pity for Issei's death, happiness for his new life, anger at how he had been treated, and genuine surprise at the existence of the book that had guided Issei to this world. The greatest shock came when Issei revealed Ophis's true identity, The Hokage's eyes widened even further, and he seemed utterly astonished. Though skeptical, the Hokage listened intently as Issei demonstrated some of the book's powers. Afterward, the Hokage expressed his sympathy for Issei's past and welcomed him to Konoha. He explained that to become a ninja, Issei would need to join the latest graduating class and take extra lessons to catch up on what he had missed. Handing Issei a letter, the Hokage instructed him to give it to Irika Yumano, who would understand everything. He also promised to arrange an apartment for Issei after classes. As Issei and Office left the Hokage's office, Hiruzen reflected on their potential. He wondered how much they would grow in such an environment and resolved to keep them safe from any threats, particularly from Danzo. With a smile, he thought that having them around could be beneficial, especially for Office, who would gain friends her age. 50 years had passed since Issei first embarked on his journey between dimensions. Over the years he had visited many worlds, made countless friends, and learned various techniques, spells, powers, and styles of combat. He had even mastered the boosted gear and unlocked new forms and abilities that made the Juggernaut drive seem weak in comparison. As Issei headed toward Office's current location, his mind wandered to some of the worlds he had visited and the lessons he had learned from them. In his first world, he learned to use chakra, master seals, and powerful jutsu such as the Rasengan. He befriended all 9-tailed beasts, who shared their chakra with him, making him a second Jubi. He also gained a new dojutsu, a combination of the Sharingan, Rinnegan, and Byakugan. In another world, he learned to control and manipulate ki, as well as God ki, allowing him to fly without wings. He mastered many techniques like the Kamehameha, instant transmission, final flash, and even the Hakai. He achieved Ultra Instinct and could use it without harming himself. In yet another world, he expanded his magical arsenal, learning new types of spells such as Dragon Slayer magic, Ice Make, Re-equip, and many others. This experience allowed him to feel what it was like to be part of a family once again. Issei visited a different world after discovering that the gods had abandoned it. He decided to help them for a while. During his time there, he unlocked his aura and discovered his semblance, which allowed him to boost other people's semblances and restore their aura. He also learned about dust and took a few dust crystals with him when he left. One of his less favorable memories involved being teleported into the middle of a battle between Godzilla and Ghidorah in Antarctica, where he was hit by one of Godzilla's atomic breaths. Afterward, he managed to replicate the attack and could use the atomic breath himself. He also helped deal with Ghidorah in Boston, and after defeating him, he found one of Ghidorah's scales and kept it as a trophy. He and Office visited another world as a sort of vacation after the events with Godzilla. There, he was discovered by the Ratatosker, who were surprised by his abilities. In the end, he was tasked with sealing spirits until he created a way to ensure they wouldn't lose control or cause any more spatial quakes. Issei traveled to yet another place to learn more ninja techniques and see if he could combine them with those he had already learned. He also used this opportunity to prepare for his return to his home world, as Drake warned him that many women would try to stalk him, making this a good way to build up resistance. One of the most interesting worlds he had visited taught him what it meant to be a hero and helped him learn to be more creative with his abilities. He learned to combine many of his powers to create far more powerful and effective attacks. This world also imparted an important lesson: even the kindest people hold dark secrets. It was filled with corruption and power-hungry nobles, altering his perception of nobility forever. This world exemplified what one of his senseis had told him before: look underneath the underneath. In the last world he visited, he helped the Avengers defeat Thanos. After defeating him, he resurrected the Asgardians who had died, along with others like Gamora, Vision, and Loki. Before he left, Doctor Strange offered to teach him the mystic arts, and the Avengers entrusted him with the Infinity Stones, believing they would be safer with him. Issei was suddenly pulled from his thoughts as he arrived at his destination. The place was a seemingly endless void filled with swirling clouds of color. This was none other than Ophus's old home, the Dimensional Gap. Looking around, he found Ophus engaged in a staring contest with a giant red dragon that seemed agitated. Sensing that this situation might escalate, Issei decided to intervene. "Hey Ophus, I think you should stop staring at that giant dragon, Issei said, but the dragon turned its attention to him and glared. Hey! I'll have you know I have a name. It's Great Red, the most badass dragon there is, the dragon shouted, causing Issei to widen his eyes in realization of who he was speaking to. Sorry, Great Red. I was trying to get Ophis to stop staring at you since I noticed you were getting annoyed, Issei apologized, aware that while he had the book to assist him, he wanted to avoid causing any trouble. Thankfully, Great Red decided to let it slide and told him not to do it again. They began to converse and discovered they had much in common. Great Red enjoyed performing tricks and causing explosions, leading to a friendly competition to see who could pull off the coolest stunt. Afterward, the two became fast friends, and the earlier tension dissipated. Issei then asked Ophis a question that had been on his mind. Hey Ophis, not to be rude or anything, but why did you ask me to come here? He inquired, as this was the first time Ophis had requested his presence. Ophis looked at Issei for a moment before turning to Great Red and speaking to him respectfully. Great Red, I came here because I wanted to ask a favor of you, she said. Are you going to ask me to leave the dimensional gap again, Ophis? The dragon replied evenly, but to his surprise, Ophis shook her head. No, I have found another place to call my home, but my favor is to help me turn Issei into a dragon, she stated, causing both Issei and Great Red, as well as Draig, who was still inside the gear, to widen their eyes in shock. Great Red was taken aback by the request, but then he noticed Ophis glance at Issei, a faint pink tint appearing on her cheeks. Then it all clicked, and Great Red understood what was going on. He decided to have some fun. Great Red teased, it seems like little Ophis has finally found someone special in her life. His playful tone seemed odd for a dragon, and his words caused both Issei and Ophis to blush. Issei had known about Ophis's feelings for a while now. Regaining their composure, they glared at the giant dragon, but he just laughed heartily, as if nothing could dampen his spirits. Eventually, Great Red calmed down and gave them a serious look. As for your request, Ophis, I will grant it as this boy interests me, Great Red said, causing Ophis to smile gratefully. She turned to Issei, checking if he was okay with it. Issei's mind was in turmoil. Here they were, two dragon gods, the most powerful beings in the world, wanting to make him one of them. He had visited many worlds, some with people far stronger than the two dragons, but he had never had to change his race since leaving his home world. Yet, how was this any different from when he received the Book of Fate? If anything, this seemed less daunting. With his new power, he would still protect those he cared about. That was all he needed to know. His mind was made up. I'll do it, Issei declared, determination etched on his face. The two dragons nodded, and in front of them, two balls of energy appeared, one red and the other pitch black. The energies moved toward Issei and entered his chest, surrounding his body with an orb of red and black. Suddenly, Issei felt an overwhelming amount of pain as every cell in his body seemed to be torn apart and reformed. He let out a scream of pain, surprising the two dragons, as that was not supposed to happen. Issei had never felt such pain in his life. As the two energies entered his body, he felt all his existing energies, magic, chakra, ki, aura, and even radiation, clashing with the new power trying to change him. For a moment, it felt like this was going to be the end when, all of a sudden, the Book of Fate appeared before him and began to resolve the issue. He felt the different energies in his body calm down, and his body started to change as it should. Issei then noticed the book was speaking to him once again. Issei Kaiser, you are no longer in danger thanks to the book before your eyes. However, it is time to reach the next level. During these 50 years, you have been observed and studied by the Book of Fate, and you have passed the final test. Congratulations, Issei Kaiser. From now on, this book will cease to exist, for you will be the book, and you will wield the power to bend the omniverse as you wish. You will no longer be judged for your actions. Issei was once again speechless. He understood what this meant. He was being told that he would become an omnipotent being with no limitations to his power. The thought shocked him. He had only ever used the book for minor tasks or when absolutely necessary because he feared becoming greedy. The idea of fusing with the book honestly scared him, but then he remembered his motives. He wanted to protect everyone he cared about, and this would ensure that his loved ones would be safe. With that resolve, Issei Kaiser said the words that would forever change his life. "I'm ready, go ahead," he said, determination shining in his eyes. "Very well, but perhaps it would be better to add a few of your trophies into this fusion." Suddenly, a hole in space opened, and from it came many items Issei had collected on his journey, such as dust crystals from Remnant, a set of Dragon Ball, Ghidorah's scale, and the Infinity Stones. Even the boosted gear materialized on his arm. The artifacts and the book began to circle him, speeding up until he was surrounded by a glowing white ring with multicolored streaks. The ring shrank until it enveloped the brown-haired boy, and then there was a massive explosion of energy. Great Red and Ophis were blown back by the force, and when they recovered, they were in shock and awe. In front of them was a giant blue and purple dragon, the size of a galaxy, its body appearing misty and cloudy, resembling a nebula. The dragon spread its massive wings and let out a powerful roar that seemed to shake the cosmos itself. Meanwhile, Surzek's Lucifer was buried in paperwork, a task many considered torturous. Adding another paper to his growing pile, he silently wished for something interesting to happen. His wish was granted when suddenly, the entire underworld and the planet began to shake, accompanied by a powerful roar in the distance. What is this?" Surzex shouted, feeling a power far beyond anything he had encountered before. He was not the only one who felt it. In heaven, a woman with blonde hair trembled from the overwhelming power. Turning to her brother, she revealed herself to be the Archangel Gabriel. "Lord Michael, do you have any idea where that power is coming from?" she asked, beads of sweat forming on her brow. Michael replied, "No, I can't sense the origin of this power because it is everywhere. Whatever is causing this is far beyond the power Father used to wield." At the Grigori, many fallen angels panicked as the entire planet continued to shake. In the midst of it all was the leader of the fallen angels, Azazel, who had a surprised look on his face. He remarked that it was certainly interesting and expressed his hope to meet whatever was strong enough to cause such power, maintaining his usual smile. At an unknown location, a girl with black hair, cat ears, and two cat tails shouted in confusion about the situation. A man with brown hair and a monkey tail responded, stating that whatever was happening, its power dwarfed Ophisis. Another man, with blonde hair and blue eyes framed by glasses, nodded in agreement. The white-haired individual in the room expressed a desire to fight whoever could release that much power in one roar, indicating their strength. The cat girl, with a playful demeanor, mentioned wanting to make kittens with them first, which led to a sly remark from the monkey boy questioning her plan if the source of the power was not a boy. The cat girl blushed in embarrassment, having not considered that, while everyone else laughed at her misfortune. Back in the dimensional gap, as soon as the dragon stopped roaring, it looked down at the two dragons, and Ophis immediately recognized its eyes. The dragon began to shrink and dissolve into the mist it was made of until the cloud became the size of a human. The mist cleared to reveal Issei Kaiser, but he looked different. His hair was now a silvery white, and his eyes were silver. He looked at them and offered a small smile, apologizing for taking so long as he had to deal with a few obstacles. Ophis, coming out of her shock, lunged at him and hugged him, surprising everyone else. She expressed her relief, thinking they had lost him, letting out a few tears that made him feel bad. He hugged her back and stroked her hair, reassuring her that he didn't mean to scare her and joking that now her brother was a dragon god just like her. Ophis snuggled deeper into his embrace, calming down after a few minutes. Looking up into his silver eyes, she simply stated his name, dropping the usual suffix she used. When he responded, wondering what would happen next, she expressed her desire for him. The unexpected declaration left Issei, Great Red, and Draig in shock. Issei's life had forever changed, but was it really for the better? There were not many things that would surprise Issei, as he was usually the one surprising people. However, this was one of the few times he found himself caught off guard. His adoptive sister suddenly expressed a desire to be closer to him. He knew she was attracted to him, but this was not what he had expected. Great Red, the giant dragon, was not helping either. After getting over his shock, He roared with laughter and gave the now silver-haired boy a thumbs up. Issei was snapped out of his thoughts when he felt Office take his hand and pull him away to a distant place in the dimensional gap. Issei asked, "Office, are you sure about this?" He hoped to either change her mind or at least understand why she suddenly wanted to be so close to him. Office responded firmly, "Yes, I am sure about this. I have wanted to do this for a long time, but I decided to wait for the right moment. Now, I can't take it anymore." Issei could tell she wasn't going to take no for an answer. With that in mind, Issei decided to accept that this was the only way to ease her insistence, as he would never use his powers on her unless her life depended on it. He sighed and said, "All right, Office, you win. But let's do this somewhere we won't be interrupted." He then warped them to a new dimension, creating a simple bedroom where they could have privacy. Office wasted no time and moved closer to him, ready to express her feelings. Issei and Office shared an intense kiss, their lips connecting passionately. After a moment, they pulled apart, a thin string of saliva lingering between them. Office, regaining her composure, began to remove her clothes, glancing at Issei with an inviting look. Understanding her cue, he followed suit, shedding his own garments while Office admired his physique. As they continued to explore their feelings for each other, Issei felt a rush of emotions. He decided to engage Office in conversation, wanting to deepen their connection. "What do you think about us?" he asked, his voice filled with curiosity. Office looked at him thoughtfully, contemplating their bond and the journey they had shared together. Issei asked Office if she could make herself look more mature, expressing his discomfort with the situation. Office nodded in response, and a purple mist enveloped her. As the mist dissipated, Issei was taken aback by her new appearance, feeling a rush of emotions. Thankfully, this transformation eased his concerns, allowing him to proceed with their interaction. He took a deep breath and moved forward. Office let out a soft sound as she felt Issei enter her, but he paused when he reached her hymen. He looked at Office, and when she nodded, he moved forward, claiming her virginity. The infinite dragon god hissed in pain but quickly recovered, starting to wiggle her hips to encourage him to move, which he did a few moments later. The room was filled with sounds of their movements for a good while before Issei felt his limit approaching. Issei exclaimed, "Office! I'm about to reach my limit." He grunted, trying to hold back. Office responded, "Please, do it inside." She was overwhelmed with pleasure, never having imagined it could feel this good. Issei complied, speeding up before going deep, hitting her CRVX. They paused for a moment to catch their breath, and Office looked at him again, asking for another round. They ended up enjoying each other for many rounds, thanks to their divine stamina. Afterward, they dressed and teleported to Great Red, who wore a cheeky grin. Red teased, "So, how did it go, you two lovebirds?" This caused them to blush, and Office flew to him, playfully pinching his horn. Red exclaimed, "Office! I hate it when you do that." He turned to Issei and continued, "Now that you are a dragon god and possibly the most powerful being in the multiverse, I think you need a title for yourself." Office nodded in agreement, prompting Issei to think deeply. Issei pondered aloud, "A title for myself? What would be a good name? I am a dragon with absolute control over everything, so technically that makes me a primordial being, as even gods have limits." His muttering caused a nearby cinnamon roll to sneeze. Eventually, Issei settled on a title. "I got it. The Primordial Dragon of the Cosmos. I like the sound of it," he declared, looking at the others, who nodded in approval. Red remarked, "Not a bad title, kid." Office agreed, saying, "The Primordial Dragon of the Cosmos. A suitable title for someone who is about to change the supernatural world for the better." In Kuo, a figure walked through the streets towards Kuo Academy. This was Issei Kaiser, using the alias Nomura Atsushi, which meant compassionate warrior. He wanted to visit his old home to see how everyone was coping with his death. While he couldn't forgive them, he held no grudges, recognizing it was his fault for taking things too far. However, Office and Drake disagreed, trying to dissuade him. Office even suggested he use his powers to know everything, but Issei preferred not to rely on that, feeling it would be a burden to know every detail of the past, present, and future. As he approached the school, he noticed many students seemed to carry a heavy sadness. Curious, he asked one student why everyone appeared so downcast, and the answer surprised him. It started about 3 months ago. The school pervert, Issei Hyoudou, was kicked out of his club. We thought he had done terrible things to the girls, and we bullied him so harshly that he ended up taking his own life. Afterward, we learned the truth. He was kicked out because his club members were tired of his behavior, and we all felt terrible for what we did, the student explained, tears in their eyes. Issei was taken aback by their remorse. He had assumed they would move on quickly, but it seemed they were affected more deeply than he realized. "I'm sorry for what happened. Let's hope he's in a better place," Issei said, and the student nodded, and they parted ways. Issei decided he needed to make things right. While he couldn't forgive them yet, he believed it had to be earned. Simply saying sorry wouldn't suffice. He approached the student council and knocked on the door. After a moment, he heard a brief, "Come in." Upon entering, he was greeted by Sona Citri, who was busy with paperwork. She paused to look at Issei, giving him a calculating gaze before smiling. "Hello, are you by any chance the new transfer student?" she asked, sensing something familiar about him. "Yes, I'm Nomura Atsushi. I've been homeschooled my whole life," he replied, bowing slightly. "Please take care of me." Sona nodded and handed him his schedule, and Issei headed to his first class of the day. Throughout the day, he encountered the members of the ORC, all appearing quite downcast. Massaging his forehead, Issei knew something had to be done. Their performance could suffer, especially in rating games. Looking for the right moment to reveal himself, Issei's eyes glowed green as he searched for an opportunity. He discovered that in a few days, a group of rogue fallen angels, led by Kokobile, would attempt to steal 3 fragments of Excalibur, prompting the church to send 2 exorcists to retrieve them. The best time to reveal himself would be during the fight against the fallen angel leader. Finding himself on the roof, Issei sat down and pulled out a lunch he had made, starting to eat it. He may not need food, but it was delicious, and he wanted to enjoy it rather than feel sorry for it later. Suddenly, he was snapped out of his culinary bliss by the door to the roof opening, and none other than Kaneko entered. She sat down on the side of the roof opposite Issei and began eating without saying a word. A few moments later, Issei decided to break the silence. He commented on the nice weather they were having, and Kaneko gave him a small nod before returning to her lunch. Taking the hint, Issei left her alone to finish his own meal. Once he was done, he pulled out a small chocolate bar, which immediately caught Kaneko's attention. Realizing this, Issei tossed her the chocolate, surprising her. She gave him a small smile before eagerly scarfing it down, her eyes widening as she recognized it as the same bar Issei would always get her when he tried to apologize for being a pervert. Without noticing, tears began to collect in her eyes, worrying the white-haired boy in front of her. Concerned, Issei asked if she was all right, puzzled by her sudden tears. Kaneko, wiping her eyes, explained that the chocolate was the same one someone she knew had brought her as an apology. She recounted how she and her friends had pushed him away, leading to his tragic decision. Although she had disliked him, none of them wanted that to happen. Suddenly, Issei hugged her, telling her it was okay and that wherever he was, he understood what she had to do. This soothing gesture made Kaneko remember a moment from the past, during the start of the rating game with Riser, one of the last times they had been on friendly terms. In that flashback, as both Issei and Kaneko waited for Riser to send his peerage members, Kaneko had shyly asked Issei for courage, looking away from him. To her surprise, Issei had grabbed her shoulders, making her look directly into his chocolate brown eyes. He assured her that she would be fine and that he would protect her, his sincere smile giving her strength. Returning to the present, Kaneko cried harder as she clung to Issei, releasing her pent-up emotions. She hated what she and the others had caused. Knowing what it was like to be abandoned by family and realizing they were responsible for his suicide made her feel no better than her sister. Meanwhile, Rias Gremory was not having a good time. After losing her pawn due to her own mistake, she and her peerage felt terrible. They tried to move on, but the guilt of causing someone to take their own life weighed heavily on them. To make matters worse, a few days ago, a pair of exorcists had visited them, informing them about the church's stolen Excalibur fragments. Kiba had left after losing a fight to the blue-haired girl known as Zenobia. Irina, another girl, was a childhood friend of Issei, and when she found out what happened to him, she was furious and refused to speak to the orc or the Hyoudous. Now, Rias and her peerage were fighting to Cerberus while Kiba and Zenobia faced off against Freed with his fused Excalibur. Up in the air, sitting on a throne, was a man who resembled a mischievous elf, watching the fight with a manic grin. This was none other than Kokabeel, the warmonger. Kokabeel shouted out of frustration, demanding to know if Rias had anyone for him to fight, as he was getting bored. Rias gritted her teeth, tears streaming down her face, wishing Issei were there. Suddenly, a voice interrupted, grabbing everyone's attention. A silver-haired boy walked into the middle of the battlefield. Kokabeel, Freed, Valper, and Zenobia were confused about who he was, but the orc recognized him immediately. Nomura Atsushi, a transfer to Kuo Academy from America, had earned their respect for helping Kaneko recover from her depression after Issei's death. As he walked toward Kokabeel, Rias felt a surge of worry for his safety. She didn't want to lose another selfless person. Desperately, Rias shouted for Nomura to run while he still could. However, he continued walking past her, amusement on his face as he turned to address her. He asked if she really had no faith in him, calling her Bucho. Rias quickly regained her composure, glaring at him and demanding to know why he called her that. Only her peerage and Issei had the right to call her Bucho. Remembering Issei's name made her heart clench, but she had to endure. He couldn't possibly be Issei, could he? Nomura, still in disguise, teased her about not recognizing him and raised his left hand, revealing a very familiar red gauntlet. Seeing this and hearing him say, "President," caused the entire orc to freeze in shock. He was alive. He was alive. Tears flowed down Rias's cheeks, as well as Akino and Asia. Kiba was also near tears but shrugged it off. He could cry later, he had a sword to destroy. Kokabeel recognized the gauntlet and grinned once again. "Now that's what I'm talking about. Let's see what you're capable of, Red Dragon Emperor," said the warmonger as he spread his wings and created a light sword while Issei sprouted the balance breaker's wings and flew up as well. He had sealed off most of his power, wanting to use only the boosted gear's power. "Ready, Draig?" Issei said excitedly. Spending a few years training with Scions had really increased his thirst for battle, which he made more interesting by only using the boosted gear. "Ready, partner," replied the Red Dragon, confident in his partner and friend's abilities. Instantly, the two vanished and began to clash, their fists creating shockwaves, and everyone was in awe at the amount of power those two had. How did he become so strong? Akino mumbled, dazed. "Senpai," Kaneko whispered in disbelief. The very boy she had wronged was the same person who comforted her and helped her recover from her guilt and was now holding his own against a cadre of fallen angels. This was something she couldn't wrap her head around. "Issei," Rias and Asia said, happy that the boy they loved was back, yet worried if he would forgive them for what they told him the last time they talked. They were also amazed by how strong he had gotten. Back to the fight, Issei and Kokabeel were having the time of their lives. This seemed more like a fun game than a fight. That was until Issei suddenly vanished, causing the fallen angel to look around in confusion before Issei shouted, "Geronimo!" He sent Kokabeel flying toward the ground. When the dust cleared, Kokabeel was seen miming in pain, and Issei landed on the ground, grabbing Kokabeel and preparing to deliver the final blow when he was interrupted. "I'm afraid I can't let you do that," a feminine voice interrupted. Issei turned to see a person in white draconic armor and instantly recognized her as the current White Dragon Empress. "I see, well then I guess it can't be helped," he said as he tossed her the injured fallen angel. After a brief conversation with their dragons, the two parted ways, leaving Issei to deal with his family. Issei stood over a near-defeated Kokabeel and was about to deal the finishing blow when he suddenly got a better idea. He opened a small magic circle and spoke through it to some people he knew. "Hey guys, I got another one for you," he said simply, and a few moments later, a portal opened. For some odd reason, Everyone felt a shiver run down their backs when they saw who came through the portal. "So where's our next victim?" asked the head of the group, wearing a fedora. Issei pointed toward Kokubile, and the group proceeded to place him in the coffin they brought with them. What happened next rendered everyone speechless. The group marched back into the portal with Kokubile in the coffin while doing a strange dance, and at that moment, everyone knew not to mess with Issei, or else they would meet his very own messenger of death.